Morning, everyone. It's lovely to be back at another IIEM, part of the Isle of Man contingent. I am conscious that they've just brought the biscuits and cakes in, and this is the second talk on the trot with the word strategy, and so I'm going to try and catch up a bit of time. What I'm going to try and do is probably very nicely leading on from that last talk, is show you in the Isle of Man how the Wildlife Trust there is trying to deliver against what we feel are much bigger strategies, and we want to feel part of that in a global context. So first of all, this is our strategic environment. So Isle of Man, we've got a government biodiversity strategy. We're also proudly the only whole nation UNESCO biosphere in the world, and we've got a Biosphere strategy. We're also part of the Wildlife Trust Federation, 46 independent charities across the British Islands. Us and Oldham are the only two that are not in the UK. And then we've got our own strategy there. And then we've got, out of the CBD and COP15, we've got the Global Biodiversity Framework. So we want to help do that, don't we? Of course we do. How do we do all that? Well, don't read this. This is if you don't know about COP15 and the Global Biodiversity Framework, Google it. It's really interesting. There's 23 targets within that. Now, you could say that everyone in this room is probably in a small way working towards every single one of those targets, or you would do if you read them and you looked at the detail, because we want to do that. We want to help, we want to fix, we want to conserve biodiversity. When I went through them preparing this talk, and actually as part of our own strategy that I'll come on to, there are 7, and again, don't read all those, but there are 7, a summary there of 7 targets that we as a Wildlife Trust feel and believe that we're really delivering strongly against. So I want to give you a bit of an example now of how in the Isle of Man we're mapping against those targets and doing our bit. The first one is the key for us is this 30% of land and sea. How do we do 30 by 30? Get 30% of this conserved, managed well for nature by 2030. And it's 2024 now, so the clock's ticking. Well, there's different ways. The first thing that we're doing is that we are, with the Isle of Man government, helping create a really good digital map. Now, we can get into the intricacies of, is it good enough if it's an ASSI? Is a wildlife site good enough? I think for us, that's down the road. Right now, we want designations that stack up. And so that is our designation map. The Isle of Man government manage it. We've added on layers. We've added on our own nature reserves. We're now looking at how we can add on elements of nature conservation and habitat creation in agri-environment. Leading on from that, we want everyone to be able to do their bit. Now, if you live in the Isle of Man and you've got a garden and you want to look after it in a nature-friendly way, you can do that, and you can go to an app and you can mark yourself and you can draw your polygon on. And if you get enough points, bush, you're allowed to then add it into a layer of local nature recovery network mapping. Now, that's a tiny bit, but for some people, if they can add their garden or their meadow or their little bit of private space into our nature recovery network, that's quite a strong motivator. And then last but not least, because she's sat in the audience, Ali, who's going to speak to you later, this is her artwork for a new campaign. And this is all about how people can make more space for nature in the Isle of Man, be it their schools, their places of work, their farms, their homes, anywhere. How do they do their bit? So we're trying to work strongly towards 30 by 30. Extinction, how do we halt that? The best example I can give you, I think, in the Isle of Man about what we've done in the last probably 20 years is Manx shearwaters. They were pretty much extinct in the island and certainly on the Calf of Man. But there's now over 1,000 breeding pairs. We can't say the RAT word in the Isle of Man. Some of you will know it's bad luck. But longtails, as we call them, or ringies, we've pretty much eradicated them in partnership with other organisations. And we've now got over 1,000 breeding pairs. So that's some success. We brought them back. The one we're really working on now, very much as a wildlife trust, and with Rob, our farmland birds officer, is tree sparrows. There aren't many of those left. And so we're doing direct interventions to try and save the tree sparrow. We're putting millet feeding stations up. We're putting bird boxes up with 28mm holes because it keeps the other sparrows out. And we're bringing citizen science sparrow watchers in to actually try and help us record the data of what we've got so that we can start to try and save our tree sparrows. Minimise the impacts of climate change and biodiversity, nature-based solutions. And we, like you and probably many others, are trying to do that in different ways. Seagrass, you've already heard mentioned this morning. We're working, we've got sponsorship from KPMG. We've formed the Manx Eelgrass Group, inspired by some of the work that's gone on in the Channel Islands. I've got no shame in saying that. This is part of the beauty of these meetings, is that we can come here and we can not pinch ideas, but learn from each other. It's really great. So we're doing seagrass work. We're part of the Manx Peat Partnership. We're actually the delivery agent now for the Isle of Man government in administrating the Manx Peat Partnership, that's making quite big gains now through Sarah Hickey, who's the Manx Peat Officer, in the uplands, of trying to not just conserve, but actually restore some of our peatlands. We've launched our first Manx carbon credit scheme. Now this, I want to stress, this is my point to talk about corporates. The corporates on that screen are Lloyds, PDMS, Resilient Asset Management, and these are companies that work pan-Crown dependency, and they remain excited about working on pan-Crown dependency projects for their eminence, for their credits, for their whole values around environmental social governance. There's a huge opportunity for everyone in this room to just get a little bit more aligned, and I don't think that will cost me money. I think they'll bring more money to the party if we show that we're, as the Minister said earlier, collaborating strongly and working together. So it could be really powerful. So we've launched that, and that's high integrity carbon credits. We, the Wildlife Trust, own the fields that they bought. We're not planting Sitka spruce. We're planting broadleaf temperate rainforest, the right biodiversity in the right place. They get the eminence. They can even go and help plant the blinking trees. They love it. And we're getting long-term nature reserves that's part of our nature recovery network in the Isle of Man. So we're quite proud of them, you can tell. And that up there is part of an Aviva-sponsored wider wildlife trust programme that last year, or sorry, 2 years ago now, bought us 105 acres of what we'd call marginal rough farmland that we're now reforesting as part of the temperate rainforest project through the whole of the Wildlife Trust Federation. So again, it's carbon sequestration, it's biodiversity working together. So we're doing our bit there. The agri-environment scheme remains probably the most exciting thing for me. There's this constant thing about conservationists and farmers, you know, almost being in conflict. I use the C word consideringly. I think that's passé now. You know, the world future, whether it's regenerative farming or, you know, just farming in a nature positive or nature friendly way, that is the future. We all eat food that's been farmed. And I think through the agri-environment scheme, we're now 3 years into being the delivery agent for that with the Isle of Man government. We've made some great gains in working with some of our 350 farmers who might be creating new habitats. They might simply be leaving stubble fields over winter, and having stood there with the thermal image camera and seeing skylarks and woodcocks in a field, in a stubble field in winter, it makes a real difference to biodiversity, the work that we're doing. Green spaces for urban planning. I don't know actually in the Channel Islands, I didn't Google it, but certainly in the UK, BNG now is legislated, it's mandated. Is it in the Channel Islands? I'm going to guess not. Biodiversity net gain. It's not in the Isle of Man either, but we have been working with, I don't mind showcasing them, I think we need to do that. So Hartford Homes are one of the developers on the island that build houses. They want to make money out of building houses. I'm fine with that. They want to do it well. They want to show for their business that they're future-proofing it, and so they're already doing biodiversity net gain, unmandated, in their projects. And this is one example of a project called Braddon Road that our ecologists have been, through Ecology Vanning, which is our consultancy arm, have been working really closely with Hartford Home to make sure that this that will be built, it's got planning, is going to be the greenest and most nature-friendly housing estate that's been built in the Isle of Man. Now, that's quite cool as well, isn't it? So small steps, and if it brings the others along, and I won't mention others, but now other builders who we're more surprised about are now starting to want to talk about BNG with us. The tide's coming. Advocacy is something that we probably haven't done enough in my nearly 5 years now as CEO of the Wildlife Trust. Now, some of that's because I've been learning, some of that's because we've been sorting out Base Camp Alpha, and some of that's because we've been getting the right people like Ali or Hannah or our Head of Conservation and Land, David, in posts and getting ourselves in a place now where we're feeling we can be much more of an advocate. And in an island like the Isle of Man or Jersey or Guernsey or Alderney or Sark, a few votes makes a big difference, doesn't it? So we're now in a world of thinking, how can we play in a very measured way, not keyboard warriors, but how can we in a very measured professional way, play a stronger arm now for our nature and wildlife. And that's the journey that we're currently on. And I'm delighted that Liz at the back, as some of you will know, Liz Charter. Liz, I pinched that off the letterheader. I know we don't have a logo yet, but that's an example now, a very, very recent example of how key conservationists and conservation organisations in the Isle of Man have come together under Liz's innovation to form a Manx Nature Alliance. Now that's giving us one voice for nature, that's actually now putting its first piece of advocacy to the government on a specific topic. It's a good step forward for us. It's our election in a couple of years. I think we'll be a more advocating organisation in that next election. We've heard a lot about states of nature, biodiversity recording. We're part of the Manx Biodiversity Recording Partnership. We're the administrator for that, for the government. Inspired by the work of Manx BirdLife, who did a red list for birds. Manx Wildlife Trust have produced one now for wildflowers, and we've recently launched one for freshwater fish. And we spent a lot of time, one of our colleagues, Claire, she went and spoke to all the conservationists, government, BAT group, whale and dolphins, invert group, Liz for fungi, and we've pulled together the best we know about our nature, and we've put it in a portal on a website. It's not brilliant, but it's the best we've got, and it will show some gaps that we can start plugging away on. So we've done that. So that's like the global framework. 7 key things that we're delivering on. We also, as Guernsey do and Jersey do, have our own island government biodiversity strategy that actually runs out next year. So we're working on that. Please don't read the text, but the last point, probably the thing that the Wildlife Trust is doing most at the coalface, apart from, if you like, everything, chipping away, is biodiversity action plans. And again, don't read the detail, but that's just 2 pages of one of the recent biodiversity action plans that's been created by our marine officer and our head of conservation for small shark tagging. So we're working away there. We have a wildlife trust strategy. The wildlife trust strategy, when I first joined in 2020, I went to a meeting with Roland, there was other chief execs there. We nearly had all 46 of us. We all locked ourselves in a room and we came out with 3 pillars: nature recovery, nature-based solutions, working with people. And from that, I went back to the Isle of Man and we created our own strategy. I'm going to tell you not to read the details, there's far too much. But it's the same 3 pillars. Now, that's a strategy in a 1-page for us that lines up with government, Biosphere, Global Framework, the Wildlife Trust strategy. And then from that, we're just in the process of finalising our delivery plan that gives us like how we're going to do it. And then also some metrics about how we're going to measure ourselves. So last 2, I'm on time. So this is, I know many people in this room will write strategies, you'll work to strategies, but I suspect not, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, I suspect not everyone does. And I know a lot of my colleagues are, sometimes it's like, I don't need a bit, I just need to crack on. But you need a strategy, don't you? Because if you don't, you do that. And what we need is to be doing that. And I think if we can do that and work with others to do that, we have a far, far greater positive impact for what we're trying to achieve. And my last slide is about, do small islands matter? And again, we've heard comments from the Minister and from others. It absolutely does. I'm proud to be part of the council of the UK Overseas Territories Conservation Forum, which represents all the UCOTs, all the Crown dependencies, trying to work together. That's over 95% plus of the UK's biodiversity is in the CDs and the UCOTs. So we have a really important role to play. And as David, our head of conservation and land, said in a recent presentation, we used to have great auks on the Isle of Man. They're extinct globally now. If we'd looked after our great auks, the world would still have great auks, wouldn't we? So we can make a difference in our small islands, and that's why I think it's so inspiring to come to these meetings. That's my talk. I've saved you a minute.
There you are.
Thank you.